Vedanta is vast. The Upanishads are the root texts of Vedanta. The Bhagavad Gita is the best known of the texts of Vedanta. The Brahma Sutras are the philosophical basis of Vedanta. Together, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutras are known as the triple foundation of Vedanta, Prasthanatraya. They are vast with their commentarial and sub-commentarial literature, like an ocean. But luckily, the masters of Vedanta have written little books like this, where they have condensed the entire teaching. What you get from this, no more than this you will get in all of those vast texts, in more detail maybe. But basic teaching here, it's complete. So there are numerous such texts. Atma Bodha of Shankaracharya, Aparoksha Anubhuti, Viveka Chudamani, Panchadashi of Vidyaranya. This little book, Drig Viveka, in one version it has, the version which we shall use has 31 verses, that's all, just 31 verses. Another version has 46 verses. Who wrote this book? We don't know. It is claimed that Shankaracharya wrote it, but most probably scholars say that another great master of Advaita, Vidyaranya, wrote this book about 700 years ago in the south of India. His famous book is Panchadashi, which is a much bigger book, but in the same style as this book, Drig Viveka. One advantage of this book, okay, that's the introduction, finished. Now we are going to get into the text, and one advantage of this book is it gets right down to it. No beating about the bush. Straight away, the most important verse in the book is the first verse. If you don't take anything away from the book, just take this one verse, the next one. Can you come to the next slide? Yes. So, this first verse, don't worry if you cannot read it. I'll chant it out, and please follow. Don't worry about the Sanskrit also. We'll chant it once, and that's the last you'll hear of the Sanskrit. I'll stick to English. This verse is the most important verse in this whole text. If you get what this says, at least half the job is done, if not 3/4 of the job. So this is most important, and we will get into this right away. I'll chant. Please try to follow after me. Rūpaṁ dṛśyaṁ locanam drik. Rūpaṁ dṛśyaṁ locanam drik. Taddṛśyaṁ dṛktu mānasam. Taddṛśyaṁ dṛktu mānasam. dhīvṛttayah-sākṣī. dhīvṛttayah-sākṣī. dṛgeva na tu dṛśyate. dṛgeva na tu dṛśyate. Very simple verse, simple Sanskrit. And the meaning is also very simple. But as you go into it, it's very powerful. The basic teaching has been given here. Central idea of this text, Drig Viveka, you find it here. What does it say? This verse has 4 quarters. Every Sanskrit shloka in this particular rhyme has 4 quarters. So 4 parts. It takes you to the truth about what you are, what I am, what we are in 4 stages. 4 stages, that's all. And it follows the simple rule of teaching that you go from the known to the unknown, from what is very familiar to us to what is very profound and deep. So step by step, it will take you in baby steps to the realization of what we are. 4 steps. First step, what does it do? It operates on a principle. Simple principle. Just hold on to this principle. Seer and the seen are different. Seer and the seen are different. Look, for example, you are looking at this book. If you look at this book, your eyes are the seer and the book is the seen. The seen object is the book. Very simple. No profound philosophy here. In fact, it's so simple you'll feel like, yeah, I get it, go on. Your eyes are seeing. You might say, no, I am seeing with the eyes. It's even simpler than that. Let's be very naive. Eyes see, and this is seen. Or anything else that you see here, around here. That is seen, and the eyes are the seer. Notice one thing. First thing you notice is the eyes are different from what they see. clearly. Your eyes are different, and this is something different. They're two different entities. The seer and the seen are two different entities. In fact, the only thing that the eyes cannot see are, what do you think? The eyes themselves, yes. Actually, it's pretty simple. It's not what is at a distance that also you can see with binoculars. It's not something that's very small that you can see with a microscope. But the eyes themselves, you cannot see with the eyes. You might say, wait a minute, I can see it in a mirror. In a mirror, you can see the reflection of your eyes, not the eyes themselves directly. In a picture, you can say, I can see my eyes in a selfie. But in a selfie, you can see the picture of your eyes. You cannot see your eyes directly. So the eyes can see only something that's different from the eyes. Seer and the seen are different. One. Another thing you notice immediately, you see many, many things. Right now you're seeing so many people and so many objects here in this hall. Before this you saw so many things, and after this you will see many other things also. The same pair of eyes sees many things. The seer is one, by which I don't mean that we have one eye, but the same organ of vision. Seer is one, the seen are many. The seer is one. The importance of this will become clear later on. The seer is one, the seen are many. Third, another thing notice, that what you see keeps changing. Just before you came to this hall, you saw something else. Your tent or the room you're staying. You saw the path. Now you see the hall. It keeps changing what you are seeing. The same pair of eyes, the seer remaining unchanged, the seen keep changing. Is that simple enough? Yeah? Three things you notice. Seer and seen are, number one, different, yes. Seer and seen are two different things. Number two, the seer is one and the seen are many. Variety. Number three, the seer remains unchanged relatively and the seen keep changing. That's it. Keep these observations in mind. This was the first stage. Very simple. Seer and seen. Eyes are the seer, the world. Rūpaṁ dṛśyaṁ means world, the forms are seen. Technically, rūpaṁ means, literally, if you see the Sanskrit, it means colors. But basically, it means what you see with the eyes. Let's go deeper. One step, the second step. Remember, we are trying to find out who we really are. The real seer, we are trying to find out. The first verse tells us, the eyes themselves become the seen, and the mind is the seer. The eyes themselves become the seen, and the mind is the seer. Now, what does it mean? It means, not only do I see the world with my eyes, but I also know with my mind, my eyes are open. This guy is boring me so much, I can't keep my eyes open. I know it. I can see very well. I know that. My eyes are good. I can't see very well. I need spectacles or contacts. So the conditions of my eyes, those are known to me. Who knows that? Not the eyes themselves. The mind reflects upon the condition of the eyes. So the mind is the seer. Now the word seeing is used metaphorically. It means the knower. So the mind becomes the seer, eyes become the seen. The mind becomes the knower, the eyes become the known. The mind is the knower, the seer, and the eyes become the known or the seen. Fair enough. We know all the conditions of the eyes and all the body, in fact. Not only the eyes, the same applies to the ears and the nose and all the sense organs. In fact, the whole body. It is the known and the mind is the knower. Now let's apply the three lessons we learned earlier. The three principles. The first and fundamental operating principle. The seer and the seen, the knower and the known are different. Is it true that the mind is different from the eyes? Yeah. Pretty obvious. Mind is, whatever the mind is, it's definitely different from the eyes. Different from the ears or the nose or the skin or the tongue. So, the mind is different from the sense organs. Number one. Number two, the conditions of the eyes keep changing.
or the conditions of the eyes and the ears and the nose, there are many. Sometimes eyes are good, sometimes the ears you cannot hear well, and so on. All of these variety of the conditions of the sense organs of the body is known by the same mind. The same mind knows the variety of conditions of the different sense organs in the body. Second. Third, the eyes, the conditions of the eyes, the ears, and the entire body, they keep changing. The mind, compared to that, relatively unchanging. It's the same mind after all. Mind changes into mind, but the eyes, ears, body, they all keep changing in various ways. So the variety of changes in your body are known by the same seer, the mind. That bears repeating. The seer and the seen are different. Number 2, the seer being one, the seen are many. Number 3, the seer remaining relatively unchanged, the seen keep changing. And again it's obvious. Again it's obvious. Now, let's go deeper.
Third stage, let's go deeper. Now the fun begins. So far it's very simple. The eyes and the objects are different, correct. The eyes and the mind are different, correct. Now the mind itself, third step, go deeper. Mind itself. Are you aware of your own mind? Yes. When I'm happy, I know I'm happy. When I'm unhappy, I know I'm unhappy. I feel it. You can't say, I was so thrilled and happy, but I didn't feel it. That sounds very strange. When you are thrilled and happy, you directly feel it. When you are miserable, you directly feel it. When you know something, you understand something, I get it. When you don't understand something, you feel confused and you directly feel it. I don't understand this. When you're trying to remember something, you remember, I remember now. When you cannot remember, you feel, it's on the tip of my tongue. I can't recall. So all the conditions of the mind, understanding, memory, feelings, all of them are directly perceived, are directly experienced. We all experience it. Question is, what experiences the different movements of the mind? The movements of the mind, in Sanskrit, they're called vritti, like lake, the waves in the ocean, movements of the mind, thoughts of the mind. They are also directly experienced. So we have to say that there is a witness of the mind within us. There is a witness of the mind within us. And that witness experiences the thoughts in the mind. So this witness, in Sanskrit, sākṣī, this witness is the seer. Within you, you are the witness of the mind. That witness is the seer, and the mind becomes the seen. In fact, the mind is as much the seen as this object. This is a physical object. The mind is mental. Thoughts, emotions, memories, ideas, desires. So the mind is seen, and the witness is the seer. We have time up to 9:30, right? Up to 9:45. Okay. More time, the better. So the witness is the seer. You are the seer of your mind. If you know your mind, if you are experiencing your mind, then the mind is also an object, the seen, and the witness is the seer. Again, make these observations. The seer and the seen must be different. If the seer and the seen are different, then we come to a remarkable conclusion. You cannot be your mind. Why not? Because you experience it. If I experience this, then it must be different from me. It is different from me. If I experience my eyes, then the eyes must be different an entity. I am the knower of the eyes. The mind is also known, then the mind must be different from me, the experiencer, the witness of the mind. And this is quite interesting, because what we normally identify, grown-up people, educated people, we generally identify ourselves with minds. And if you're asked to describe ourselves, we would probably say, we are minds in this body, embodied. We are a person. We are in this body. We are a mind. But here you see the mind is also experienced. If the mind is experienced, then the mind is an object, and you are the experiencer, the seer of the mind. There's a nice story about a man in India who went to a Swami high in the Himalayas. The higher you go, the wiser the Swami. So this man goes to the Swami and asks, Swami, I'm very miserable. I'm very miserable. Tell me the solution. And the Swami says, do you experience the misery in your mind? Do you experience the misery? He says, yes, my mind is very miserable. I experience it. That's why I've come to you. Of course, I feel it. That's why I've come to you. Now you know what's coming. The Swami said, if you experience the misery in your mind, then that misery is an object. It's seen. You are the seer, and the seer and the seen are different. If you experience the misery in your mind, you cannot be miserable. You are the knower of the misery in your mind, and hence you cannot be miserable. You are not the possessor of the misery. You are the witness of the misery in your mind. This person thought, what a strange thought. I've never thought about it that way. And the Swami said, think about it for some time. If you actually think about it for some time, it really works, If you are feeling unhappy or down, instead of identifying and hugging that unhappiness, I'm so unhappy. Instead of doing that, you put it there. Here is the unhappiness and I'm watching the unhappiness. I experience the unhappiness. I am the witness. The unhappiness is an object in my mind. It's a physical object. Unhappiness, mental object. It actually works. Whether it is depression or it is anger or whatever, it works. It calms down your mind immediately. You feel a distance, a gap between yourself and the mind. But this is not the end of the story. The real punchline comes next. The man came back to the Swami and he said, oh, Swami, you're right. That unhappiness is an object. I am not unhappy. I am the witness of the unhappiness in my mind. I am the witness of the misery in my mind. I am so peaceful now. And the Swami said, no, you're not peaceful. You are the witness of the peace in your mind. And that's important. Because, what happens? Whether you practice yoga or bhakti or jnana or whatever, and you get some peace in the mind, oh, the unhappiness is gone, I get peace, and we embrace that peace. What happens is, in embracing the peace in the mind, you are embracing the mind again. And the mind is changeable. It will change again. After some time, when the same man goes down from the Himalayas back to Delhi or Mumbai or somewhere, and he finds himself caught in the traffic jam or something, and he will think, oh, I was so peaceful in the Himalayas with the Swami, or in the Shivananda ashram, you're so peaceful. Now I'm back to New York or something, and so mind is so disturbed again. You are the witness of the misery in the mind, the restlessness of the mind. You are the witness of the peace of the mind also. When you can distance yourself from the movements of the mind, you find real peace. That real peace is not subject to the changes of the mind. That real peace is your real nature. The witness is ever at peace. The mind oscillates between peace and restlessness, between desire and calmness, between unhappiness and pleasure. But the witness is ever untouched by all of this.
You are the knower of the happiness in your mind. You are the knower of the misery in your mind. You are different from the happiness. You are apart from the misery. You are the observer, quite different from the peace in your mind. In fact, thus being different from the peace or the lack of peace in your mind, that is true peace. In the Upanishads, Mandukya Upanishad, one of the names for the Atman, the self, one of your names is peace. Shantam Shivam. The name of the Atman is peace. It's not that the Atman, that the spiritual self is peaceful. It is peace itself. Whether the mind is at peace, whether the body is at peace, whether the world is at peace, you are eternally undisturbed. That peace, that is the witness. That is what you are. Even when you clutch the mind to yourself, this is my mind. The misery of the mind is my mind. The ignorance of the mind is my mind. The unspiritual nature, the worldly nature of the mind is my mind. Even then, we are telling ourselves something that is false. We are attached, so strongly attached to the mind, and through the mind to the world. I often give this very stark example we find in the Vedanta among the Swamis in the Himalayas. Think of the greatest possible attachment in the world. The greatest possible attachment, human attachment in the world, is the attachment of a mother for her baby. The greatest possible attachment. And it's a good attachment. The baby needs it. But it's the greatest possible. It's extremely strong. Whatever the mother does, somewhere at the back of the mind will be an awareness of what the child is doing and how the child is. Now imagine that mother, when the baby goes to sleep and finally the mother goes to sleep. I can see some lady smiling. Swami, you don't know anything about babies. Mothers do not get much sleep. Yes, but when the mother finally goes to sleep, that mother, so tremendously attached to the baby, would not like to be separated from the baby for more than a little bit of time. That mother happily, completely, totally forgets the baby. Not unwillingly, willingly goes into deep sleep, complete forgetfulness of the world, of the baby, of her own body, everything forgotten. And the mother does that every night. And does it willingly and happily. It's a common experience. We never reflect upon it philosophically, what it means philosophically. So, whatever is there in the mind, you are the witness of that mind, and the witness is ever separate from the mind. The very fact that you are the knower of the mind means you are not the mind. Not yet Vedanta, very far from it. But already, just about every problem in the world is solved. What a strange statement, Swami. Think about it. Problems are in the world, or in our bodies, or in our minds. If you are separate from the mind, you are an entity, you are independent of the mind and the body. The problems of the mind and the body do not touch you. You may be aware of them. When they come up, you are aware of them. When they go away, you are aware that the problems have gone. But they are not your problems. They never were, they never will be. You are free to hold on to them. My misery, my poverty, my failure, my desires. You are free to hold on to them, but they do not belong to you. You have to learn to let go of what you cannot hold on to. It will go away anyway. It has come, you imagine that you are holding on to it, it will go away. However hard you hold on to your worst problem, it goes away. It goes away every night. Just think about it. The guy with the worst kind of problems in the intensive care unit of the what's the hospital, Cedar Sinai? In the intensive care unit of that hospital, of dying, multiple diseases, organ failure, no hope. The moment that guy goes into sleep, into deep sleep, that guy's deep sleep, and the billionaire's deep sleep, and Obama's deep sleep, the president, most powerful country in the world, their deep sleep is exactly the same. No problems. All right. Now, learning to let go. I can't help but tell you that little story here. It's another of the stories the Swamis in the Himalayas tell. What is this learning to let go? There was this monkey, a farmer, who used to keep bananas in a jar. And the jar had a narrow neck. And there was a monkey who watched this. And when the farmer would go a little distance away, the monkey would come down from the tree and put its hand in the jar and take out the bananas and run away. And the farmer thought, how do I control this pest? So what he did, he got a jar with a much more narrower neck. And he put it there and he forced the bananas inside one by one. The monkey watched all this. When the farmer went a little distance, the monkey climbed down, put its hand in, you can imagine the triumphant grin, and caught hold of the banana. But the problem is now, it can't pull the banana out of the jar. Because the neck is not wide enough for the banana and its hand. And the farmer comes and thrashes the poor little monkey, gives him a solid beating. Now how can the poor little monkey, it's not very poor, but pretty naughty monkey, how can the monkey escape the thrashing? The only way the monkey can escape is to let go of the banana. But the monkey doesn't occur to it, so attached to the banana tremendously, I will not let go. And it takes a beating. You can just let go, and it can run away. But it will not let go. It is not trapped. The only thing that traps it, its desire and its confusion. That I cannot take my hand out. You cannot take your hand out because you are holding on to something which is not part of your hand. How does the monkey escape? By letting go of the banana. Letting go of the banana, the monkey becomes a monk. You let go of what never belonged to you anyway. What does not belong to you? That which belongs to the world. That which belongs to the body. That which is part of the mind. None of this belongs to you. You are the witness.
That witness is the real seer, and Vedanta says, you are that. Tat tvam asi, that thou art. Whether the mind is calm, it's good to have a calm mind, but whether the mind is calm or not calm, whether you are meditating or working in the office, in every case, whether you're caught in a traffic jam or sitting and watching the beautiful the ocean and the beach here in the Bahamas, in every case, the witness is the same. An infinite consciousness, aware, unchanging light, always there. That's what we really are. Over that we put a covering of the mind, over that we put a covering of the body, and with this mind and body, we experience the world. But this body is like the cloth I'm wearing. This mind is like the shirt underneath. Beyond that, these are just coverings. These are just instruments. You are not the body. You are not the mind. You are not subject to the changes of the body. Body will change. No matter how much gluten-free you do. Healthy lifestyle, yoga, gluten-free, very good. You can manage it, yes. And you live a more peaceful, get more well-being, good life. But the thing is, sooner or later, the body degenerates. One day this body is going to go. Do I die with the body? Or am I something that survives the death of the body? That was not born with the birth of the body, that does not age with the aging of the body, that does not die with the death of the body. That witness consciousness is right here. It's by the light of that we experience everything. And you are that. Third stage, there's one more stage left. When you hear such a thing, wonderful, this witness consciousness, I am this witness consciousness, great, let me experience it. The fourth stage comes and tells you, dṛgeva na dṛśyate. Unfortunately, the witness cannot be seen.
I can see the shocked expression in most of your faces. Swami, you should have told us this earlier. I wouldn't have signed up for this course. Can I have my $3 back? More than 100 years ago in London, Swami Viveka was giving a talk on Advaita Vedanta, on Jnana Yoga, and he said exactly this thing. The self cannot be known, is not an object of knowledge. Then he says, hurries on and says, but you must not go away with the idea that it is unknown. It is more than known. In every knowledge, the self reveals itself. The Kena Upanishad says, what is the self? The knower, the witness. The Kena Upanishad says, it is something different from the known. Oh, so it's unknown. No, it's something different from the unknown. Think about it. If I ask you a question, what is it that's different from all that you know? All the subjects you know, the people you know, your memories, ideas, opinions, different from all of that. And different from all that you do not know. There's a vast ocean of the ignorance which we have. We do not know many things. So there are many things which we do not know, and there are many things which we know. What is it that's different from both of them? It's not something that we know. It's not something that we do not know. Yes, some people have an idea. Yes?
What you are?
Exactly. Yourself. You say, no, Swami, I know myself. What do you know about yourself? You know what your passport tells you, your driver's license tells you. You know your body, you can see the body. You know your memories, your family, all that's in the mind. And if you know all that, it must be different from you. That which knows all this, do you know that? No. It cannot be an object of knowledge. And yet, it is not unknown. For what is more known than yourself? You know that you exist. You know that you are. It's exactly like, how do I know you are all there? Because I can see you. How do I know that my eyes are there? I can't say because I can see my eyes. I know that I have got eyes and they're in perfect working order because, not because I can see my eyes, because I can see you. Whatever I see proves to me not only that object is there, but also that my eyes are there. In the same way, whatever experience you have, you see something in the world outside, it proves that you are the conscious self.
You see, the problem is that we have identified ourselves with things which are not ourself, with the body, with the mind. We take these to be I, me, but we are not these. Vedanta tells us that we are awareness, pure awareness. Now, how do we reach that? How do we appreciate what we truly are? By this method. This is the method that has been adopted, that the real nature of the self is that which is aware, and anything that we are aware of is not the real self, is an object to the real self. It's a very powerful method. Now, if you follow this method, even if you think about this method, then you will come to this question, which this gentleman has asked. The question is, so our goal is to know ourselves, self-realization, self-knowledge. Whatever we are aware of is an object, not the self. So when we reach self-knowledge, we'll be knowing the self, but then the self will be an object, because whatever we know is an object. Then it will not be the real self. And this question has to be appreciated. Then you can understand the beauty of the answer. So the answer is that the self can never be known as an object. Whatever is an object is not the self, and that criterion remains true till the very end also. Whatever you know as an object is not the self. So, will the self remain unknown? If the goal is self-knowledge, will we fail in attaining the goal? Will it remain with the self? Will my real self always remain unknown? No. It is more than known. It is not known in the usual sense of knowledge. What is the usual sense of knowledge? Whatever we know as an object, the usual sense of knowledge is by knowing something as an object. I, the consciousness, I deploy instruments of knowledge through the mind and the senses. So through the mind and the eyes, I, the consciousness, I see. What do I see? Objects, forms. I, this awareness, through the mind and the ears, I hear. What do I hear? Objects, sound. Similarly, other objects are there. For each sense organ, separate object. There is smell, and there is taste, and there is touch. Not only that, there are subtle objects in our mind itself. Thought and imagination and memory and ideas and desires, emotions. These are also objects. Why? Because we are aware of them. So at the level of the external world, the objects, physical body which is part of the external world, object. The breath, we are aware of it, object. Thoughts, emotions, memories, aware of it, object. Not the self. Beyond that, even the intellect which we are using right now for understanding all this, that is also an object. It's a process we are aware of. Beyond that, if you push, as he says, you will reach a blankness. The blankness we experience in deep sleep. The blankness we experience in deep meditation also. Because it is experienced, that's also an object. It is not us. Then, see, here is the beauty of it. We now are looking for our real self. And our tendency is to objectify. Why? Because we have always seen objects. Whatever we know are always objects. So somewhere, even if we say, I know that the self is not an object, we say that, we think that, but Unconsciously, the impulse is to objectify the self. It can never be objectified. It is not an object of awareness. It is the awareness itself. Then how is it known? Will it be unknown? No, it is more than known. In every act of knowledge it is known. Whenever you know something, the presence of objects, you are knowing the self itself. Whenever you know the absence of objects, you're still knowing the self itself. It's like, let me give you an example. It's only an example. So when I show you the clock, what do you see? It's a clock. And then I show you the mic here. What do you see? Mic. I show you the cloth here. What do you see? Cloth. Clock, mic, cloth. 3 different objects. But notice there's something else you're missing. It is not just clock. It is the light reflected of the clock. There is clock here plus light. The light is falling on it and then it's illumining the clock. So you're seeing the light. The same light falls on this mic and illumines it. It is mic plus light that gives you the experience of the microphone. It is cloth plus light which gives you the experience of the cloth. What is common to all of them? Clock is different from mic is different from cloth, but the same light is illumining all of them. In the same way, there is consciousness in every experience, in every knowledge of every object. One thing is there, consciousness is always there. Now, why did I say it's only an example? One thing one must be careful of here. The clock is a material object, but the light which is reflected from this clock is also a material object. So that does not apply to consciousness. What I mean is, in every knowledge, consciousness is there, but not as an object, as the illuminer of that object. Once we realize that, then we will find it in every knowledge. In Kenopanishad it is said, pratibodha viditam matam amritatvam hi vindate. In every episode of knowledge, in seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, in thinking, remembering, understanding, forgetting, loving, hating, whatever it is, the same consciousness is shining everywhere, but not as an object. So it is self-revealed. Self-revealed. Self-revealed is in Sanskrit swaprakasha. Swaprakasha. It does not know itself. It is, in English, self-revealed or self-luminous, swaprakasha. It is revealed by itself continuously, but it's not an object to itself. So when enlightenment comes, you cannot say that the self will know itself. No. It does not technically know itself, but it is more than known. It is self-revealed. It's self-luminous. Not only in enlightenment, in every knowledge, in all ordinary knowledge, in religious knowledge, spiritual knowledge, in all kinds of knowledge, consciousness is self-revealed. Just as the light is common when it's reflected of all the objects. In self-knowledge, what happens is you realize the luminous nature of consciousness, and then in every act of knowledge, the self is revealed. Consciousness is revealed. So the answer to the question is, when self-realization comes, will the self know itself? If it knows itself, then it becomes an object. It cannot be the self anymore. No, it will not know itself as an object. But the self-luminous nature of consciousness will be revealed to us and will be continuously available. It is already continuously available to us. We don't recognize it, that's all. We will recognize it in, thereafter, every act of knowledge, in every episode of knowledge, it will be recognized. And that is called freedom in Kenopanishad. Pratibodha viditam matam amritatvam hi vindate. In every cognition, when consciousness reveals itself, when you realize it, the presence of consciousness, yourself, the self, real self, that is called immortality.
Not just in the temple or in the church, not just at the time of prayer, not just even in samadhi. In every experience, when you're talking, you're thinking, you are laughing, in every experience, when that self, this existence, consciousness, bliss is realized, that is immortality. And that is possible. So the fourth quarter says, this self, the witness, is the true seer. What about the mind? It is the seen, This witness plus the mind becomes the seer of the body and the sense organs. This witness plus the mind and the body and the sense organs becomes the seer of this world. But the true, real seer is this witness alone. Everything else is the seen. This witness is the knower. Everything else is the known. And this witness is separate from all that is known. This witness is unchanging. Everything else is changing. This witness is one. All others are multifarious, multiple. This is, in brief, the explanation of just the first verse.
Let us just repeat the verse again before we conclude today's class. Rūpaṁ dṛśyaṁ locanam drig. Rūpaṁ dṛśyaṁ locanam drig. Taddṛśyaṁ dṛktu mānasam. Taddṛśyaṁ dṛktu mānasam. dhīvṛttayah-sākṣī. dhīvṛttayah-sākṣī. dṛgeva na tu dṛśyate. Dṛgeva na tu dṛśyate. For those who are interested in the Sanskrit, rūpaṁ means forms. Dṛśyaṁ means what is seen. Locanam means eyes. So the eyes, drig means seer. So the eyes are the seer, forms are the seen. Taddṛśyaṁ, that means the eyes themselves become the dṛśya, the seen. And the mind, mānasam means the mind. The mind becomes the seer, drig. Then in the third step, dṛśyā dhīvṛttayah-sākṣī. Dhīvṛtti means modifications of the mind, movements of the mind, waves in the lake of the mind. Those become the seen, and the witness, sākṣī, the witness is the seer. And then the last one, that seer never becomes the seen. dṛgeva na tu dṛśyate. That can never become an object. That's what it says.
Now we'll go further ahead. We'll go into the next few verses. Some of you were thinking last time, if it took 1 hour to explain one verse, we are not going to make much progress. But don't worry, it's not going to be like that. Some of the verses we can move much faster. For example, now we are going to do the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th verses. And we are going to do them one after another, because what these verses do, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, is just explain the first verse. What we saw last time, that is explained in detail by these 4 verses. These Sanskrit verses, shlokas, they have 4 quarters, 4 parts. 1st quarter, 2nd quarter, 3rd quarter, and 4th quarter. And this verse which we did also has 4 quarters. The 1st quarter is, forms are the seen and the eyes are the seer. That's the quarter 1. And verse number 2 explains this quarter. The 2nd quarter is, the eyes are the seen and the mind is the seer. And the 2nd quarter is explained by the 3rd verse. And similarly, the 3rd quarter, the mind itself is seen and there is a witness to the mind. That is explained by the 4th verse. And the 5th verse explains the 4th quarter, that the seer of the mind, the witness itself, never becomes an object of knowledge, never is experienced. It is always the experiencer. So now we shall go into the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th verses, one after another.
The 2nd verse says, nīla-pīta-sthūla-sūkṣma hrasva-dīrghādi bhedataḥ nānāvidhāni rūpāṇi paśyellocanam-ekadhā.
So the 1st quarter of the 1st verse, eyes are the seer and the world of forms and shapes, colors, that is the seen, that is explained in detail here. And what is said here? Something very simple. Colors. Nīla and Pīta means blue and yellow. Sthūla and Sūkṣma means gross and subtle. Hrasva means short. Dīrgha means long. Adi means etc. Bhedataḥ, these differences. nānāvidhāni rūpāṇi, the variety of forms. Paśyet, sees, the eyes by themselves, ekadhā. Forms in the world outside, some are gross forms, some are very subtle forms. All of them are seen by the eye. This is an explanation of the 1st quarter. Meaning thereby, the seer, the eyes, are different from the forms which they see.
Second step, now the eyes themselves become the seen and the mind is the seer. āndhya-māndya-paṭutveṣu netradharmeṣu caikadhā saṅkalpayen-manaḥ śrotra tvagādau yojyatām-idam.
I'll read out the Sanskrit. Āndhya means blindness. Māndya means dullness of the eyes, the inability of the eyes to see well. Patu, sharpness of vision. 20 by 20, they say, doctors. And netradharma, the qualities of the mind, the characteristics of the eyes. Netra means eyes, characteristics of the eyes. Ekadhā, by itself, the mind. Saṅkalpayen-manaḥ, the mind can cognize, can understand, can think about. Now what do? It's the same thing, not only for the eyes, also for all our sense organs. Why only the eyes? Ears. What the condition of my ears? I can know, I can hear well, or I need, I think I can hear well, but everybody tells me you cannot hear well, so you need hearing aid. So the conditions of the ears are well known to the mind. The mind understands it, so the mind is different from the ears. And so for the skin, the nose, and so on, the tongue, and so on. So śrotra means ears, tvag means skin. Ears, skin, nose, tongue, all the sense organs. Yojyatām-idam. You can fit it here. The same goes for all the other sense organs. The mind by itself understands, cognizes, knows, sees the sense organs. So the mind is different from the sense organs. And by that reasoning, the mind is something which knows the body from within. And so the mind is the knower, sense organs and the physical body are the known. So the mind must be different from them because the seer and the seen are different. This is the fundamental distinction that we are holding on to from the very beginning.
4, verse number 4. Now, third step, you step back and the mind, this is the interesting step, where the mind itself becomes the seen and you are the witness of the mind. Kāma-saṅkalpa-sandehau śrotra-środhe-dhrititare dhīvṛttayah-sākṣī bhāsayate-ekadhā chiti.
It's a beautiful verse. Chitihi means consciousness. Consciousness illumines by itself. What does it illumine? What does consciousness shine upon? It shines upon the contents of our minds. And what are the contents of our minds? Kama, desire. I want this, I want that. Desire. I want something. We are aware that we want something. Now here I'll make a subtle distinction. The distinction is this. When we say that we are aware when we want something, when we say we are aware of our thoughts, what they mean here is not that you are thinking about your thoughts. That's called introspection. Even when I don't think about it, when I want something, I'm also immediately aware that there is a thought or desire in my mind, even without reflecting back upon it. So consciousness directly illumines our thoughts, our emotions, our desires, our memories, our understanding or lack of understanding. All of that is directly illumined by consciousness.
Kama, desire, revealed by you, the consciousness. Saṅkalpa, I will do this or do that, revealed by you, the consciousness. Sandeha, doubt. Do I understand or do I not understand? I'm not very sure. Doubt. That is also revealed by the same consciousness, which you are. Shraddha, a faith in the firm conviction, this is right. Ashraddha, I don't get this, I don't understand this, I don't like this. That is also revealed by the same consciousness. That you are the conscious self. Shankaracharya says in one of his commentaries, the one who doubts, yaeva-tasya nirakarta in Sanskrit, the one who doubts that I am the Atman, it is the Atman of that very person. Because without that consciousness, you would not be aware of the doubt also. It's like, you say the cloud covers the sun. Actually, even the cloud which seems to cover the sun, that's also revealed by the same sunlight. In the same way, even a doubt comes. is this true? Am I an infinite consciousness, unchanging consciousness, or am I just the body and mind? This very thought itself is being revealed by consciousness. So, Shraddha, Dhriti itare. Dhriti is firm purpose. I shall finish this course which I have undertaken, the yoga teacher's training course. I'm going to finish it, see it through to the end. Itara, the other thing, the lack of determination. I feel shaky. No, it's too tough. Maybe I can't do it. All of these are revealed by the same consciousness. Modesty, intelligence, fear, all things in the mind are revealed by the same unchanging consciousness. Mind changes. Consciousness is aware of the changing mind. The 5th verse is one of my favorite verses in all of Vedantic literature. Very beautiful. It reveals the real nature. What are you? Not body, not mind. An infinite awareness. 5th verse. No deti nastametyesha na vriddhim yati nakshayam swayam vibhatyatanyani bhasayet sadhanam vina. A very beautiful verse. It says, you the consciousness, that witness, it neither rises nor sets. Like the sun rises and sun sets. You the consciousness, you neither rise nor set. You are ever shining. Even in the sun, there is no sunrise and sunset. It's from our point of view that we have a sunrise and a sunset. If you go to the sun, no sunrise and sunset. Sun is always shining. You, the consciousness, you are always shining. Na vriddhim yati nakshayam. It neither increases nor decreases. You might ask, Swami, what do you mean it doesn't decrease? I'm feeling a distinct decrease in my consciousness now. Time for bed, So you're feeling slowly consciousness. No, that's actually the mind. Consciousness reveals the alert mind. Consciousness reveals the dull mind. Consciousness reveals the sleepy mind. It's same consciousness. Not increasing, not decreasing.
This consciousness within, ever shining. No, the comparison is with the sun. It does not rise. Every day we experience sunrise and sunset. The sun of consciousness never rises, never sets. Eternally shining. No deti nastameti. Neither it rises, neither does it set. Always shining. There is a similar verse in the Panchadashi where it says, days pass, months pass, consciousness shines. Years pass, the body grows old, dies, consciousness watches, shines. The ages roll past, thousands of years, life after life comes and goes. Consciousness, unchanging, watches. So it neither rises nor sets. The Panchadashi goes further. This is yugas, millions of years, the cycle of creation, the universe itself, from Big Bang to what do they call it? Big Crunch. Yes, the universe dies a heat death. Consciousness is still watching. So that consciousness is not something that we talk about when we are talking about psychology or physiology, the brain producing consciousness. Not that. That's as far as the biologists or physiologists, the scientists have gone. But this consciousness is fundamental. This is before matter. It only functions through the mind and the brain. So, neither does it rise nor does it set. No deti nastameti. Neither does it increase nor decrease. Swami, sometimes I'm more conscious, sometimes less conscious. I have to struggle to remain conscious during Vedanta class, for example. Yeah, we do lose consciousness in sleep. So are we not unconscious in sleep? This whole idea of your consciousness always shining. I remember right here in this hall last year, I gave a talk from Panchadashi, and there was this young girl who had come from Canada with her parents. And she asked this question before the class. This whole idea of yours having one unchanging consciousness. Well, in deep sleep, when we fall asleep, there's no consciousness. So, doesn't it break down there? Let alone ages passing and death and many thousands of years passing and consciousness shining. None of that. Every day we fall asleep and we are unconscious, consciousness is switched off. Where is consciousness? Well, that's where Indian philosophy ventures to disagree. We shall see all that later. Why do we feel that sometimes we are more conscious, sometimes we are less conscious, sometimes we are unconscious? Why do we feel that? All those things will be taken up and explained in detail afterwards, in a few verses hence. But it will just suffice to say that in deep sleep also this consciousness is there. The difference between deep sleep and this state is, here consciousness has some object to be aware of. In deep sleep there is nothing to be aware of. There is no world for us. Remember, this is a subjective approach. So we are talking about your experience or my experience. Don't say that in deep sleep, Swami, what do you mean? That there is no world, there is no body, there is no mind. We can see the fellow sleeping and snoring. So how come there is no body? We are taking an objective look from outside. But what is that person's experience? What is your experience in deep sleep? What is my experience? My experience is that I have no experience of the world. I have no experience of the body, the sense organs. I have no experience of the mind, thoughts, feelings, emotions. I have no experience of myself as reflecting upon my own existence. And yet, they say consciousness is there. There is nothing for it to be aware of. It's just consciousness. I remember there was a debate between philosophers and scientists in the Institute of Culture in Gold Park several years ago in Calcutta. And they came to this point. They couldn't agree upon the definition of consciousness. So finally somebody asked the neuroscientist, Doctor, in neuroscience, in deep sleep, is there consciousness or not? From your scientific point of view. And the scientist stood up and said, the way we define consciousness, there is no consciousness in deep sleep. There is no consciousness in deep sleep. And the philosopher, a Sankhyan philosopher who's also an American, Professor Larson, he stood up and said, well, from the Indian philosophy point of view, Vedanta or Sankhya point of view, in deep sleep there is only consciousness. See, this is the difference. In deep sleep there is no consciousness, and deep sleep there is only consciousness. Consciousness without having any object to be aware of. So consciousness is still there in deep sleep. Mystics were aware of this. I was reading a Christian mystic, such a beautiful experience, the beautiful language. He says, just like in deep space, the blackness of space, in deep space, we think it's black, dark. It's actually full of light near the sun. It's full of light. There is nothing to reflect the light. So it appears to be completely dark. Similarly, in a deep sleep, consciousness is there, but there's nothing to reflect consciousness, nothing for consciousness to be aware of. What happens in deep sleep? Swayam vibhati. It shines by itself. And in the waking state, in the dream state, that consciousness illumines other things. Atha anyani. It illumines everything else. Just imagine, to be aware of anything, we need an instrument. To know that people are there in the room, you need eyes. How did you know all these people were there in the room? I saw them. How did you know that the Swami was speaking? I heard him. So we know with the help of instruments of knowledge. So you know that all others were in the room because you saw them. How do you know that you were in the room? Don't say, I saw myself. You don't have to wait to see yourself. Even before you know anything, you're already aware of your own existence. So consciousness is self-illumined. It does not depend on any instrument of knowledge to express itself or to shine forth. To know other things, it requires instruments. Mind is required to know thoughts, feelings, emotions. Mind and sense organs are required to know the body and the external world. So the same consciousness, the seer, the knower, the ultimate subject, the witness, uses the mind and the sense organs to know the body and to know the external world. But itself, he says, swayam vibhati, it's called swaprakasha, self-luminous. Consciousness is ever shining and it's self-luminous. It does not require a second entity to know itself. Bhasayet sadhanam vina. It illumines without any instrument. To know the mic or the table, I require the instrument of the eyes. But to know the contents of my own mind, consciousness does not require any instrument. It illumines directly. So this is what? the explanation of the fourth quarter, the last quarter, the one which is our real nature, pure consciousness.
Swayam vibhati, it shines by itself like a light. You don't need another light to reveal this light. This light shines and reveals the every object in the hall. And you don't need another light to reveal the light. Light reveals itself and everything else. You, the consciousness, you shining forth, you reveal the mind, and through the mind, the body. Through the body and mind, you reveal the world to yourself. And the consciousness is self-luminous. Bhasayet sadhanam vina. Without any instrument, it directly illumines whatever its object is. So that unchanging consciousness. So verse number 6. Chichaya veshato buddhau bhanam dhistu dvidha sthita ekahankriti anyasyad antah karana rūpini. What does it mean? Consciousness. When I say the ultimate seer is consciousness, immediately what we think is, yeah, I get it. I am conscious right now. I am aware. I am sentient. We all are. Right now we feel consciousness within ourselves. So is that the witness self? Is that Atman? Is that Brahman? Is that the ultimate reality which Vedanta speaks about? That consciousness which we all feel right now, that we are conscious beings? Vedanta says, actually not so. The consciousness that we feel right now, this awareness in the mind which we feel now, is a reflection of the witness consciousness, is a reflection of the real, the pure consciousness. The pure consciousness, we don't have a notion about it now. What we have right now is this reflected consciousness. The word used in Sanskrit is chit chaya. Literally it means the shadow or reflection of consciousness. Chit, consciousness, chaya, reflection or shadow. It's a bit like this. At night, we don't see the sun. We don't see sunlight, but in one sense we do, because it's the sunlight reflected from the moon which illumines the world. When you see the world shining in moonlight, basically what's happening is that the sun shines on the moon and the moon reflects that sunlight to earth, and with that reflected light we see the world at night. This is exactly what is happening. Pure consciousness, we don't seem to understand what is meant by that. We understand what the world is. We understand what the body is. We understand what the mind is. We even understand what is meant by consciousness in the mind. So far, so good. But what is this pure consciousness they're talking about? Just like the sun at night, it's not visible, but its effects are visible. Because of that consciousness, because of that pure consciousness, the Atman, our minds are lit up. Just like the moon is lit up, not by its own light. We say moonlight, but its moon doesn't have even a little bit of light. It's by the light of the unseen sun at night that the moon is lit up. And by that moonlight, we experience the world. In the same way, it is by the light of the Atman, of pure consciousness, the witness. I use these words synonymously. The witness, Sakshi, Atman, self, Brahman, the ultimate reality. They are all that one same pure consciousness. They're different words. Now, exactly like that, the mind has the capacity, being very fine, mind has the capacity to reflect consciousness and then use that consciousness. For what? For exactly this. For seeing, for hearing, for smelling, tasting, touching, for thinking, for all our conscious experiences. The mind and the sense organs do not have consciousness of their own, Vedanta says. It is the witness consciousness, the Sakshi, the witness consciousness which we arrived at in the last two classes. That witness consciousness shining on the mind becomes the reflected consciousness. And that reflected consciousness illumines the mind. And the sense organs borrow consciousness from the mind. And the body now borrows consciousness from the sensory system. To the point that the sensory system functions, the Upanishad says, Anakagrat, I have spread myself up to the tips of my fingernails.
I have spread myself up to the tips of my fingernails. Up to this point, I am. We all feel that right now. Beyond this, I am not. This is me, this is not me. How does that work? Because this body is conscious. Where did the body get consciousness from? Does it belong to the body? No, it does not belong to the body. How do you know it does not belong to the body? Because sometimes the body is conscious, and when the body dies, or when we fall unconscious, the body loses consciousness. It does not act as a conscious being anymore. So the body does not have its own consciousness. You see, there is this concept of intrinsic consciousness and borrowed consciousness. What's the difference? Borrowed consciousness is that which comes and goes. Intrinsic consciousness is that which stays. A very simple example would be when we cook. The fire is burning, and we put a vessel on the fire, and we put water in the vessel, and we put vegetables in the water. After some time, the vegetables are hot. They get boiled. So the vegetables, the heat of the vegetables, the heat in the vegetables, does it belong to the vegetables? If it did, it would always be hot. But if you switch off when you serve it, put it out there, very soon the vegetables are cold. So the heat does not belong to the vegetables. When they were in the refrigerator, they were cold, and in the pan they are hot. When you serve them out, after some time they become cold. So it becomes cold because the heat in the vegetables was borrowed. Borrowed from what? From the boiling water. Does the water have heat of its own, intrinsic heat? No. Because it was cold earlier, now it's boiling. And after some time it will become cold again. Therefore it has borrowed its heat. Where has the water borrowed the heat from? From the pan, which is red hot. Does the pan have heat of its own? No. It's borrowed its heat. Where has it borrowed its heat from? From the fire. And the fire, where has it borrowed its heat from? It has heat of its own. As long as the fire lasts, it will be hot. It has intrinsic heat. Whenever the fire is there, it is hot. Consciousness is borrowed in the body from the sensory system, the nervous system. And the sensory system has borrowed consciousness from the mind. And the mind has borrowed consciousness from the reflected consciousness. And the reflected consciousness is borrowed from the Sakshi, the witness consciousness. And the witness consciousness is borrowed from nobody. It is intrinsic consciousness. It is consciousness itself. It's always there. It's always consciousness. Whereas the mind and the sensory system lose consciousness. In deep sleep, not conscious. And in death, when the mind, the subtle body goes away to other worlds, maybe to other births, then the body lies dead. No longer do we say, that is me. We don't say that. So, the body has borrowed consciousness from the sensory system from the mind from the reflected consciousness in the mind, and the reflected consciousness is borrowed from the witness consciousness, the Sakshi, which we are. We lend consciousness to this, and then up to the tips of my fingers I say, I am conscious. That accounts for the difference between this body and this microphone. Though this body is an object of experience, this microphone is also an object of experience. What causes confusion is there is consciousness in the body. That's why we feel, I am this body. But the fact is, I am not this body. Now let us look at the verse. We'll see it's very easy to understand. For those of you who are following the Sanskrit, Chit-chaya veshato buddho bhanam. In the subtle body, in the buddhi, in the subtle body, various terms are used. In the subtle body, Chit-chaya, literally it means the shadow of consciousness. This is the sixth verse. Chit-chaya means, literally it means the shadow of consciousness. Or in our terms, reflected consciousness. Reflected consciousness shines in the mind, and hence we get bhanam, knowledge. What knowledge? Every knowledge. All kinds of knowledge are possible: seeing, hearing, thinking, understanding, loving, hating, wanting, meditating. All of that is possible because of the reflected consciousness in the mind.
In fact, I'd like to share with you, and just an aside, right now a very a popular subject, very interesting subject in the scientific world is consciousness studies. It's interesting that even 20, 25 or 30 years ago, this scientists did not seem to be interested in consciousness. At the most, body, mind, that's it. But consciousness studies is a big thing right now. And if you Google consciousness studies, Google hard problem of consciousness. Hard problem. There is a central question in consciousness studies which seems to puzzle all the scientists and philosophers and linguists and psychologists and neuroscientists. So many. It's a multidisciplinary subject, consciousness studies. But there is a question that puzzles all of them. How is it that a physical system like this body, how is it like a physical system like the brain and the nervous system? Completely physical. The doctors can see it. This physical system, how does it generate a subjective experience? You see, what is meant by subjective experience is when you are looking at me, right now when you're looking at this stage, you have an experience. And the neuroscientist will tell you such and such neurons are firing in your brain and giving you that experience. Now, our experience is not of neurons firing. You see colors, you hear sound, you think thoughts, you feel happy, you feel unhappy. All of these things are subjective, first-person experiences. How can an objective thing, how can a piece of matter like the brain generate a completely subjective first-person experience? That is something that they cannot understand at all. And they call it the hard problem of consciousness. Here is an interesting approach to the hard problem of consciousness. It is pure consciousness itself shining on the mind which gives you these subjective experiences. This is the Vedantic or Advaitic perspective on the hard problem of consciousness. Anyway, let's go ahead with this. Because of the reflection of consciousness in the mind. Now, the mind itself, here the author divides into two parts.
Dhīstu dvidha sthita. The mind, let us divide it into two parts.
One is ego. Right now, if you look into the mind, you will feel an I sense. I not in this. I as the vertical I. I am thinking, so that I. And the other part he divides and he calls it antakarana, the inner instrument. In traditional Vedanta, here he's doing something new. In traditional Vedanta, when we study the mind, we divide it into four parts. Mano, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. The mind itself, which thinks. Buddhi, intellect, which understands. Ego, which says I am thinking, I am listening. So I. And the memory, chitta, the storehouse of all memories and impressions. So four parts, traditional division. Mind itself is divided into actually the mind, intellect, ego and memory. Mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. In fact, some of you who chant the Nirvana Shatakam of Shankaracharya, you will see the first line of that. The first line of that beautiful hymn where he says, I am pure consciousness, I am of the nature of Shiva. The first line is very interesting. It says, Mano buddhi ahankara chittani naham. I am not the mind, I am not the intellect, I am not the ego, I am not the memory. This is precisely who we normally think we are. The person, the little person, my memories. Here, the author has done something new. Instead of dividing the mind into four parts, mind, intellect, ego and memory, he divides the mind into two parts. The ego and the rest of the mind. Why he's doing this, we will see very soon. Eka ahankriti, one is ego. And the other one is antakarana, the inner instrument, the rest of the mind. So just basically a division. Now he's going to use that to explain something. Verse 7. Yes. Chāyāhaṅkārayoraikyam taptāya pindavanmatam tadahaṅkāra tādātmyāt dehascetanatamagat. What he says is, first I'll translate the verse directly for you and then explain. The reflected consciousness and the ego, they become identified. And he gives an example. A ball of iron in a blast furnace in a factory, it glows red hot. A ball of iron which is heated in a blast furnace in a factory, it glows red hot. So the heat, the fire element and the iron, they are identified. They seem to be one and the same. Exactly like that, reflected consciousness and the ego seem to be one and the same. They become completely identified.
The I sense in our mind, the ego sense. Remember, what else is there in the mind? The reflected consciousness. The reflected consciousness all the time. In the mind, the reflected consciousness is there. The reflected consciousness and the I, they become one. How do they become one? Just like when I look in a mirror, there's a reflected face in the mirror. When I look in a mirror, there's a reflected face in the mirror, and the reflected face and the mirror are one. They become identified. You cannot separate them. Whenever there is a mirror, there will be a reflection. So the reflection and the mirror are one. The reflection here is the reflected consciousness. Your face is the original consciousness, the witness consciousness, and the mirror is the I sense. Mirror is the I sense, ahankara. The ahankara, the I sense, ego, and the reflected consciousness are one, like the reflection and a mirror. They become one. And the ego catches the reflected consciousness and transmits it to the rest of the mind, and the mind transmits it to the sensory system, and the sensory system transmits it to the body. He's showing how this body feels conscious. You see. Tad ahankara tad atmya. Look at the Sanskrit now. Because of the identification with the ego. Identification of ego and what? Don't get confused. Ego and the reflected consciousness. The ego and the reflected consciousness, because they are identified, they become virtually identical. The ego becomes conscious. Just look inward. Let's look inside and we feel I. And it feels like the most conscious thing we have. The most conscious thing we experience is my I-ness. And that I-ness now transmits consciousness throughout the mind, through the sensory system, up to the ends of the body. Wherever the sensory system is functioning, we will feel consciousness. That's what it has said. Chaya ahankarayor aikyam. The oneness of the reflected consciousness and the ego sense is like what? It uses an ancient example. Like a red hot iron ball. A red hot iron ball. Imagine an iron ball in a factory in a blast furnace. When you push it inside, it comes out. It's round, it's heavy, but it's also glowing red and it's hot. Now there are two things there. What are the two things? It looks like one thing. A red, hot, round thing, heavy thing. But there are two things there. The heat of that iron ball, that red hot iron ball, the heat does not belong to the ball. Heat belongs to fire. The round shape of that thing, it belongs to the iron ball, not to the fire. The glow, the red glow, belongs to the fire, not to the iron ball. The weight belongs to the iron ball, not to the fire. So the fire and iron ball are mixed together, becomes one. It just looks like one thing, a shining thing. Just like that, the ego is like the iron ball. And the reflected consciousness is like fire. The reflected consciousness in the mind is like fire. And the ego is like iron ball. Fire is a good example of consciousness because it's bright. And the iron ball is a good example of the ego because it's an insentient thought. And the two are identified together and they shine. And then what happens? Tad ahankara tadatmyan. Because of identification with the I becomes identified with the reflected consciousness, and the I is identified with the mind and the body. Don't we feel? My thoughts, my ideas, my memory, I is identified with the mind, and with the mind and the body also. I, this body. So the I, which is already shining with the reflected consciousness, is also identified with the body, and the body gets this reflected consciousness. And the body feels conscious. I am conscious. Okay. Eighth verse and ninth verse. Really subtle and very important. He says, Swami, you say every verse is very important. Well, it's like that. I can't help it. But it's some extremely subtle and powerful ideas are given here. I guarantee it. If we get what they are saying, we'll already feel the bounds of Maya loosening. I'll go over this material slowly. What he has done so far, he has isolated the I. Focus on the I. I, the ego sense, me. Focus on it. Now, what are the other things around it? One is the reflected consciousness. Another one is the actual original witness consciousness. And the third thing is the body. Body. The body, the witness consciousness, and the reflected consciousness. These are the three things around what? Around me, I. Aham, I. There is a reflected consciousness, there is a witness consciousness according to Vedanta, and there is the body, I can see that. Now, what he's going to do is, he's going to show us, he's going to ask the question, what is my relationship to the body? What is my relationship to the reflected consciousness? And what is this I? What is its relationship to the witness consciousness? Three questions. What is the relationship of the I, that I which I'm feeling right now? That I, what is its relationship to this body? And the I which I'm feeling right now, what is its relationship to the reflected consciousness? What is the reflected consciousness? Just the consciousness we are feeling right now. All of us, we are feeling conscious, sentient, aware. What is its relationship? What is my relationship to consciousness? That I's relationship to consciousness. And what is the I's relationship to the witness consciousness, the Sakshi? These three questions. Let us see. The answer will give us a vivid picture of our current situation, what we are right now, and what we have to do. Ahamkarasya tadatmyam, karasya tadatmyam, chichchāya deha-sākṣibhi, chichchāya deha-sākṣibhi, sahajam karmajam bhranti, sahajam karmajam bhranti, janyam cha trividham kramat, janyam cha trividham kramat. Beautiful verse. He says, I am identified with three things. I am identified with the body, I am this. I am identified with the consciousness, because every time I think I, it's a conscious experience. I am conscious. And there is the witness consciousness, which according to Vedanta I really am. So I should be identified with that also. So these are the three things with which I am identified.
Immediately when you say I, automatically it comes, I am this. So the ego, mentally draw a picture, ego, I, is connected with three things. Reflected consciousness, body, pure consciousness.
The ego, the I, is identified with the body, with the reflected consciousness in the mind, and with the pure consciousness, witness consciousness, the Sakshi. What kind of relationship? What kind of relationship do I have with these three things? With the body, with the reflected consciousness, and with the real pure consciousness, Satchidananda, with the Sakshi witness? The answers are crucial. He gives the three answers. Sahajam, natural. Karmajam, born of karma. And Bhranti-janyam, born of error. First of all, my relationship, the relationship of the I with the reflected consciousness is natural. Just like a mirror and the reflection. Wherever I put a mirror in front of me, my face will be naturally reflected in the mirror. Mirror and the reflected face will always be together. How long? As long as the mirror is there and the face is there, it will be reflected. It's the very nature of the mirror to reflect. So the I sense will always feel conscious.
The ego always shines in the reflected consciousness. When you think right now, I, don't you feel I am aware? All the time you feel. The moment you think I, it's an aware I. It's a conscious I. It's an I shining in awareness.
This is the ego. It's a function of the mind. And we always experience this ego as a shining, as a sentient ego. That sentiency in the ego is the reflected consciousness. And that I is connected to the reflected consciousness. I am always aware. Whenever I think of myself as a sentient being, as an aware being, as a conscious being. The ego and the reflected consciousness, because they are identified, they become virtually identical. The ego becomes conscious. Just look inward. Let's look inside and we feel I. And it feels like the most conscious thing we have. The most conscious thing we experience is my I-ness. Because pure consciousness, witness consciousness is there. The I functions like a mirror. So there'll be a reflected consciousness with the I always. Reflected consciousness and I have a natural relationship. Whenever there is an I sense, there will be a reflected consciousness. Whenever there is a reflected consciousness, it means there will be an I sense. Natural. They go together. The relationship between I and the body, karmajam, born of karma. This body we have got, according to Vedanta, we have got this body because of our past karma. We have got this body because of our past karma. The good and the bad together have come together to give us results. A part of our karma. We have liquidated a part of our assets in the bank. And that liquidated asset is our karma for this life. The good and the bad. The good karma gives rise to pleasant experiences. The bad karma gives rise to unpleasant experiences. And you know what they say in Vedanta? If you have really good karma, if you have good karma, you have pleasant experiences. If you have really, really good karma, you come to Vedanta. Yeah, I'm not joking, they say that. You get a guru, you hear of Vedanta, you get a guru and a mantra, and you hear of Vedantic doctrines. It's a sign of great good karma. So I congratulate all of you. So, the karma gives us this body. This body is born of our karma. As long as my present karma, the karma of this life, technically called prarabdha karma, as long as the prarabdha karma of this life lasts, the body will last. When this particular part of my karma is exhausted, the body will die. And I am related to this body as long as that karma lasts. The moment that particular karma is finished, karma for this life is finished, the body will die and my relationship with this body will snap. I will no longer say, I am the body. They will take it and burn it or cremate it or bury it or whatever. I don't say I am that. I transmigrate. I go to another body, produced again by my new karma, with which I will have a relationship. This is the second thing. My relationship with the body is born of karma. As long as karma lasts, I will have to say, I am this body. When karma is finished, body dies, and I will no longer say I am this body. Now comes the crucial question, the real crucial question. What is my relationship, the I feeling, bear down here, concentrate here. The I feeling which we have right now, what is its relationship to the witness consciousness? That is the question. What is its relationship to Brahman, to Atman, to existence, consciousness, bliss? All the same thing. Witness consciousness, Brahman, Atman, Satchidananda, all the same thing. What is the relationship of Brahman, Satchidananda, Atma, Sakshi, witness consciousness, pure consciousness, whatever you call it, with the I feeling which I've got right now? And the answer is no relationship. There is no relationship. Bhranti janyam, it is born of error. We, the pure consciousness, we feel I in this body, it's born of error. I am really not I. Yes.
What we think we are, we don't think we are the witness consciousness. We think we are the ego. This ego shining in the light of reflected consciousness, this is the villain. We think we are that. Here I am, I use the word I for myself. Notice one thing. The seer and the seen are different. This book is the seen, it's different from you. The eyes are the seen, it's different from the mind. The mind is the seen. If you say the mind is different from me, the mind includes the ego. When I say I identify myself with that I. But let me ask you, do you experience the I? This is the crucial question. Do you experience your ego? If you sit quietly and do you feel I? Do you feel that? All of us, when we look into the mind, do we feel the ego? Yeah, we can say I. With confidence, we can say, yes, I am sitting. Do I feel that? Yep. I am listening. Yes. So the ego is something that is experienced. If it is experienced, it is the seen. And you are the seer of the ego. Do you see where I'm going with this? The ego is the seen, and you are the seer of the ego. Otherwise, it wouldn't be experienced. If it is experienced, it's an object just like this. Even the ego, even the I is an object. I don't mean this I mean the vertical I. Even that is an object. You are not the ego. You are not the ego. The ego shines in your light. We get identified with the ego and we think we are the ego, and the rest of it flows immediately. The ego is identified with the mind, and the ego is identified with the body, and then we think we are the body and mind. This is how the mechanism works.
You see, we chant it lovingly. Mano buddhya hankara chittani naham. Do you know what it translates into? I am not the mind, manas, buddhi. I am not the intellect, chitta. I am not the memory. Ahankara. Mano buddhya hankara chittani naham. Ahankara. Ego. It literally translates as I am not the ego, or I am not the I. The witness consciousness which you or I really are, we are the witness of the I. You have to take one step back from the I, the ego. Take a step back from the I to merge into your real existence consciousness bliss. It is not the ego who will get freedom. Moksha, mukti, nirvana, enlightenment. The ego will never get freedom or enlightenment. You will get freedom from the ego. The I does not become free. You will be free from the I. When Mr. X or Mrs. Y becomes free, enlightened, Mr. X is enlightened from Mr. X. From being the limited individual, the ego which is identified with Mr. X. The ego still remains in the mind, identified with reflected consciousness and with the body. But you, the free being now, the witness consciousness, you are separated from it. You still shine upon it. The mind works, the ego works, the body works, goes on doing what it was doing earlier. You are completely free. You recognize you have always been free from it. So the relationship between the real you and the I sense in the mind is born of error. Bhranti janyam, born of error. And that which is born of error can be corrected by knowledge. That which is born of error can be corrected by knowledge. The snake which we see by mistake in a rope is born of error. It can be corrected not by chasing it with a stick, not by shooting at it with a shotgun or trying to scare it away. It can only be corrected by knowledge of the reality that it is a rope. So only knowledge can separate us from the I sense, the ego. That's all that has been said here in the 8th verse. The 9th verse will tell us how to be free based on this understanding. If you have understood it till now, I know it's heavy going. How do we snap these three relationships? I and the body. How will I be free from this body? I and reflected consciousness. How will I end relationship between myself and reflected consciousness? This I sense and pure consciousness or witness consciousness. How can we snap this relationship? How can I remain as witness consciousness? These three are answered here. Each of these verses is like bombshells. So much is packed into them. We will do this and stop for questions. Sambandhino satornasti, sambandhino satornasti, nivritti sahajasyatu, karmakshayat prabodhacha, karmakshayat prabodhacha, nivartete kramadubhe, nivartete kramadubhe. Three relationships between the I and the reflected consciousness, between the I and the body, between the I and the real I, the witness consciousness. The apparent I and the real I. So in Vivekananda's lecture, the real man and the apparent man. So the real I and the apparent I. These three relationships, how can we snap them? How can we be free of them? He says, the natural relationship between the reflecting medium and the reflection, between the I and the reflected consciousness, will persist as long as both of them are there. When a mirror is there, there will be a reflected face. You can't do anything about it. As long as you are awake, as long as you are using the mind in the waking state or in the dreaming state, we are using the mind, there will be an I, and that I will appear conscious. Only when you switch off the mind, when the mirror is turned down and kept face down, the reflection will disappear. When you go into deep sleep, the mind shuts down, there is no reflection and there is no I sense. So, as long as the mind is there, there will be a reflected consciousness and the two will appear together. Sambandhino sator nasti nivritti sahajasyatu. Of the natural relationship between the I and the reflected consciousness, there is no snapping that relationship as long as both of the terms of the relationship are present. As long as the mirror and the face are present, there will be a reflection.
What we think we are, we don't think we are the witness consciousness. We think we are the ego. This ego shining in the light of reflected consciousness, this is the villain. We think we are that. Here I am, I use the word I for myself. Notice one thing. The seer and the seen are different. This book is the seen, it's different from you. The eyes are the seen, it's different from the mind. The mind is the seen. If you say the mind is different from me, the mind includes the ego. When I say I identify myself with that I. But let me ask you, do you experience the I? This is the crucial question. Do you experience your ego? If you sit quietly and do you feel I? Do you feel that? All of us, when we look into the mind, do we feel the ego? Yeah, we can say I. With confidence we can say, yes, I am sitting. Do I feel that? Yep. I am listening. Yes. So the ego is something that is experienced. If it is experienced, it is the seen. And you are the seer of the ego. Do you see where I'm going with this? The ego is the seen, and you are the seer of the ego. Otherwise it wouldn't be experienced. If it is experienced, it's an object just like this. Even the ego, even the I is an object. I don't mean this I mean the vertical I. Even that is an object. You are not the ego. You are not the ego. The ego shines in your light. We get identified with the ego and we think we are the ego, and the rest of it flows immediately. The ego is identified with the mind, and the ego is identified with the body, and then we think we are the body and mind. This is how the mechanism works.
Then, karmakshayat. How do you snap the relationship between yourself and the body? When karma is exhausted, at the point of death. When the body dies, the I will be free of the body. Only way, there's no other way. Karma exhausted, body dies, and the I with the subtle body goes to another body. And snaps its relationship with this dead body. Now we come to the crucial thing. What can Vedanta do for us? What can spirituality do for us? Here is the crucial thing. Prabodhacha. The third relationship, the relationship between the Atman, the pure consciousness, the witness consciousness, and the I sense, the ego in the mind. How can it be snapped? Prabodhat, by knowledge. by an awakening. By an awakening. When you awaken, the I does not awaken. You awaken from the I, from the dream called the limited existence of an individual. You awaken from this little cocoon. The worm which built a cocoon around itself flies out a butterfly, a glorious butterfly. So you awaken from the dream you call a limited human life. That's why the Buddha's name is so evocative. Buddha means the awakened. Meaning thereby the rest of us are either asleep or in a dream state. So awaken from the dream of being a limited individual, limited human being. You step back from it. You let go of it. There is no awakening, illumination, freedom, enlightenment for the body. The only fate of the body, I am sorry to say, is death. From dust it has come, it will go back to dust. And sooner than we think, unfortunately. Every day it is going back to dust. There is no enlightenment for the body. It will not survive death. But the subtle body survives death. The subtle body, the mind, intellect, according to Vedanta, according to every religion, not just Hinduism. Religion is based on the fact that the subtle body survives death. But there is no enlightenment for the subtle body also. It will go from birth to birth, gathering experiences. The moment that enlightening knowledge comes, that the reality, the pure consciousness, the witness consciousness remains in its, as we say, sway mahimni, in its own glory. The subtle body dissolves back into nature. Subtle body, like the physical body, was provided by nature. Provided by Maya, by Prakriti. If you are a Sankhya philosopher, you will say Prakriti provided you with the subtle body. If you are an Advaitin, like most of us here, you will say Maya provided you with this subtle body. But what has come from Maya or Prakriti or whatever, it means nature. It will go back to nature. Physical bodies, we have had many. Subtle bodies, each of us has one. When we get enlightenment, the subtle body also dissolves.